Alright, so today we're looking at part two of our Gilded Age unit, where we're looking at immigration and urbanization. Last time we talked about was the Great Chicago Fire. And first, we're going to be looking at the social gospel movement. And in this movement was a reform program where the leaders would preach that, if you want to reach salvation, you had to help the poor. And so they would establish settlement houses. And in these settlement houses, they would take care of them, kind of like a homeless shelter. There you could find these in slums to help and friendship for poor immigrants. Jane Addams helped run the settlement houses, which were run by middle-class, college-educated women. They provided classes, healthcare, and clothing, and she was a pretty well-known social reformer across the country. The settlement houses would help cultivate social responsibility toward the urban poor. Okay. Moving into part three of politics. So during the late 1800s, many cities were run by a political machine. This was an organized group headed by a city boss that controlled activities of a political party in a city. They also had power over civil servant jobs. They offered services to voters and businesses in exchange for political or financial support. And they're kind of like now political machines, when they're not corrupt, are done right, but when they're not, they're kind of like the mafia. So what did the political bosses do? They controlled access to jobs. They built parks, sewer systems, and waterworks, and they gave money to hospitals, schools, and orphanages. So what do bosses get out of their charity? They get voters' loyalty, they win additional public support, they extend their influence, and then so basically they did favors for people so that they were seen as favorable and people would vote for them in the future. So if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. That kind of idea. Immigrants like the ideas of political machines and bosses. Why? Many of the bosses were immigrants themselves, first or second generation. They spoke their language and battled the same hardships. They helped the immigrants with naturalization, helps them become full citizens. Helped them get jobs and houses, and in return, political bosses got votes. But many bosses got rich through an illegal system called graft, where they use their political influence for personal gain. So how would this work? So let's say you were helping a person find work on a construction project for the city. That way, a political machine can ask the worker to build the city for more than the actual cost of materials and labor. So the worker would then reach a kickback, which is an illegal cash payment, a portion of the earnings to the machine. Some more fraud. Alright, political machines also granted favors to businesses in return to cash and also accepted bribes to allow illegal gambling to flourish. To win elections, some filled the list of eligible voters with names dogs, children, and the dead. The most famous political machine corrupt wing is Boss Tweed. William M. Tweed became the head of Tammany Hall. That is the most powerful political machine in New York City, and is a Democratic one. Between 1869 and 1871, Boss Tweed is going to defraud the city for millions of dollars. So what does he do? Well, one of the things he did was when the New York City courthouse was being built, the taxpayers had to pay $13 million while the actual cost was only $3 million. And the difference went to the Tweed ring. And it is also estimated that this ring stole between 30 to 200 million more dollars from New York City. This is just an example of the kind of fraud that this ring got away with until, boom, they got busted. And in 1871, the ring was broken. Tweed will be indicted on 120 counts of fraud and extortion and was sentenced to 12 years in jail. He was able to use his influence to get his sentence reduced to 1 year, but he gets in trouble again and is arrested. While serving this sentence, he eventually escapes and goes to Spain. One interesting side note, during his crime spree, he tried to pay off the New York Times and Thomas Nast, who was a political cartoonist, so they wouldn't run editorials on his corruptive practices. So Tweed will end up offering the New York Times $5 million and Thomas Nast 500,000, and they will both decline. Okay. Patronage. Okay, this is national politics are also corrupt. Okay, so that was political machines or local politics. Now we're looking at national politics. So patronage is the spoil system. Basically, you give government jobs to people of the same party who had helped a candidate get elected. And so reformers want a better way of electing people. That people that should be the most qualified. So now civil service is just a term we give to government jobs, non-military jobs. Reformers want a merit system. They believe that civil service jobs would go to the most qualified regardless of political views, which is something I'm digressing again. Alright, President Hayes tries to reform the civil service system. He investigates courthouses where lots of patronage is going on there. He fires corrupt officials. And he hires independents for his cabinet. Those are new. That's the one thing. If you're a president, you need to hire the best man for the job in your cabinet, no matter who he or she represents on the political spectrum. I firmly believe that. But does it work? Some member of the Republican Party objected. There needed to be a balance between reformers and Republicans. So Hayes decided not to run for re-election out of frustration in 1880. Now, Republicans are going to become divided in the 1880 election. Stalwarts opposed change in patronage system, and the reformers are going to support changing the system. So the Republican Party settles on James A. Garfield, who was an independent candidate, and Chester A. Arthur will be nominated to the vice president spot. Unfortunately, Garfield is going to be assassinated, I believe, less than a year after becoming president. As Garfield walks through the D.C. train station, he is shot 2 times by a man that Garfield turned down for a job by the name of Charles Guiteau. Guiteau? He was a diehard stalwart, so he opposed Garfield's reformer ties, and he was caught and hanged. Chester Arthur would become president, and he will turn into a reformer as well. Alright, so his first message to Congress was to pass the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which created a civil service commission to give government jobs based on merit, not politics. This helped reform civil service. So how does this affect politics? Well, by 1901, more than 40% of all federal jobs had been classified as civil service positions. A pro reason for this is that this act made these positions much more honest and efficient. On the other hand, though, as a con, officials could no longer pressure employees for campaign contributions. Politicians will turn to other sources for donations. Business will buy influence. Politicians no longer had jobs to offer. They had trouble seeking money from supporters, so many will turn to wealthy business leaders for support. Big business and the government became good friends. That's why people that ran many things were people like Andrew Carnegie, John Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, people we've been watching and learning about. Tariffs became a big issue in the 1880s and 90s. A tariff is a tax placed on goods coming into or going out of a country. Most Americans believe tariffs were necessary to protect U.S. industries from foreign competition. Tariffs did cause prices to rise, and for 12 years, tariffs were a key issue in presidential elections. Grover Cleveland was the first Democratic president who tried but failed to reduce tariffs. First Democratic president in 28 years. He attempted to lower tariffs. Congress chooses not to support him. So in 1888, Benjamin Harrison, who was a Republican, won the support of big business and supported tariffs. So he signs the McKinley Tariff Act into law, and tariffs will be raised to the highest level ever. Grover Cleveland defeats Harrison in 1892 to become president again. He's the only president to not serve 2 consecutive terms. Grover Cleveland is both the 22nd and the 24th president of the United States. He was successful in reducing tariffs. And William McKinley was elected president in 1897 and raised tariffs again. All right, and the spirit of reform is going to keep going to the 20th century, and which will be called the Progressive Era, and we learn more about that later. And so, despite so much corruption, we do see some movements to making things better, but it's a very slow process. And it goes back to the problems of monopolies and trust placing a hold on our country's future, becoming too powerful.